let's go out back to this Arizona Cardinals at Chicago matchup. Let's talk a little bit more granular now and understand exactly some of the weather risks. And I have the College of DuPage her gust 10-meter gust forecast. So the HER model is this high resolution weather model that allows us to kind of understand more smaller scale features to kind of resolve that due to the resolution of the model itself and the temporal resolution. And Sean was mentioning some gusty conditions here for Sunday in the Windy City, and we can see here right around game time. This is Sunday afternoon, and we can actually see some really intense southeasterly gusts. Right, we're looking at gusts in the upper 20s and lower 30s around game time. And I want to focus on the actual wind vector, the location of where the wind's coming. So, Sean, you are a Chicago person. You've been there for many years. Can you tell me a little bit about, the Chicago Bears Stadium and how this is oriented here?
Yeah, it's right on Lake Michigan. It's actually Soldier Field is just a little bit south of the main loop area. But as Mike, as you can see, has this picture up here, is that this stadium is oriented north to south, and it's right on the lake. So we're expecting these winds out of the south, right? So this is probably going to be a little bit more of a parallel wind event as opposed to a kind of a perpendicular crosswind event, which can either be a little bit easier for you to maybe make some kicks or maybe some passes, or much more difficult. But the winds will be whipping because we are so close to the shore as well.
Yeah, so this is a parallel wind event. This is also the potential return of Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. We've been waiting for weeks now, multiple weeks, for these guys to return, especially if you spent some capital on Hopkins early on in the draft. And Murray was a pretty high drafted quarterback as well. Both are game time decisions here in this game, so we're going to have to pay attention right down to the wire. It seemed like there was a lot more optimism earlier in the week for them to make their return, bearing a setback. I haven't heard of any reports of both of these guys, having any setbacks, so I'm expecting them to play. Yeah. But as we, the Arizona Cardinals organization is going to be very cautious with these guys. So, I think that there is a small chance that they sit out, but I also lean in favor that they return. Sean, do you have any comments on the return of these two?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in alignment with you. I think Kyler Murray right now, the reports are that he is going to start this one. Right now, he's officially listed as questionable, but I anticipate him starting. I think Hopkins is going to be a little bit more of a game time decision. I think both are really going to make a push to be out in the field because they have struggled a little bit more offensively of late. But it's worth noting here that the over-under for this game is incredibly low. It's around 42 and a half, with the implied point total for the Chicago Bears only around 18 points. So regardless, this is not expected to be a barn burner. And with the added weather component, I expect the flow of this game maybe to be slowed down a little bit and there not to be a ton of points being scored. Mike, you have Kyler Murray in our league, right? Are you planning on starting him coming off this injury, playing in some messy weather? Or are you going to hold and wait?
So in redraft leagues, I am playing him because that's basically, you're just looking at the quarterback list who's available on the free agent list. It's really tough to say, oh, I want to start one of these guys over Kyler Murray. So I am playing him in redraft, and that's because I'm forced to.
Yeah.
In DFS, I'm not going out and trying to start Kyler Murray. Chicago's been giving up the 10th fewest points to opposing quarterbacks this season. And looking at Kyler Murray in historical standards, in weather games, he hasn't really played a whole lot in weather events. I was taking a look at some of his statistics. I mean, he's got one game played in wet conditions in precip, and he has 4 games in windy conditions, which windy is I'm not sure exactly how Yahoo is classifying what their wind threshold is. It might be something under what the game is predicted to be. So I'm a little concerned there. There just isn't a huge sample size. But as I mentioned, like if you're forced to play him in redraft, I'm doing it just because Kyler Murray is a phenomenal athlete. He's got upside in rushing, and he seems to be doing well with his passing attack. DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Christian Kirk, and Rondale Moore. If Hopkins plays, then he's going to have all of his wide receivers available. However, it's not the best matchup, right? Chicago
Yeah,
is a stout
they are, and they've
defense.
been even a little bit better than that of late. They've been kind of sneaky good of late, the Chicago defense. And I think I'm with you here. I am not super confident in Kyler Murray coming off this injury. He has only played in one precipitation game, and that is a very limited sample size. But what our stats are telling us is that when he is playing in rain, his point totals, fantasy point totals, and just point totals in general regarding passing yards, touchdowns are definitely down. So I'm definitely more hesitant in starting Kyler in these messy conditions potentially throughout the game. And Hopkins, he has just been unfortunately not a reliable wide receiver one this year. So I'm kind of holding on the passing attack on the Cardinals. Now on the other end, James Conner, he's been a beast. I mean, actually, the Chicago defense against the rush has been better of late as well. They're more middle of the tier, but a little better of late. But I expect James Conner to get north of 20 carries in this one. And he has actually had a touchdown in every single game up from week 7. So week 7 until current, he has gotten a touchdown in every game. In most of these games, he's getting 15 to 20 carries. I expect him to kind of carry a little bit more of the load as Kyler gets more acclimated, and especially if these conditions are going to be rainy. We do see about a 10 to 15% uptick in fantasy points for running backs, or at least opportunities for running backs in these games.
Yeah, James Conner's been a tremendous value if you draft him in a redraft. And a lot of that has to do with Chase Edmonds also getting hurt. He's still on the IR, so we're not expecting Edmonds in this game. And James Conner, he is a touchdown machine, as Sean mentioned. He is the second most touchdowns of any running back, rushing touchdowns this season. He's second to who's the monster Jonathan Taylor himself. But I think that James Conner, if you are interested in playing DFS, he is a safe start in this one because he will get the value. He gets the slight boost based off of weather conditions. And I think he's just been producing steadily each week. And especially as Kyler Murray comes back, you expect the offense to produce a little bit better. You'd expect that just based off of an upgrade at the quarterback position.
And go ahead, Mike.
Oh, yeah, finish up your James Conner talk because I want to move off to the tight end position here.
Okay, yeah, well, before we do that, I mean, first off, what Mike said, I am playing James Conner in my DFS. I'm putting into that lineup. I think this is going to be a slower moving game. I don't think there's going to be a ton of big plays in this one. So I think James Conner is going to get a lot of volume. But quickly, before we move on to tight end, what are you doing with David Montgomery? Right, he has definitely struggled of late. He's usually hitting around the 15 carry mark, but he's had, I think, 63 yards or less in his past 3 games and no touchdowns on the ground here. So what are you doing with David Montgomery against this Arizona front, which is not as good as their passing front here, but they're still a solid defense? What are you doing with David Montgomery?
So if you have depth at the running back position, I would recommend probably not trying to find a different option. In my ESPN league, I have a number of good running backs. I actually put Montgomery on the bench this week. Doesn't mean that he will not get volume in this game, but I just don't trust the overall offense right now of the Chicago Bears outside of Darnell Mooney. I mean, Mooney's been a highlight so far as of late, and he's been getting a ton of volume. Montgomery coming off the injury, it just doesn't seem like to me he's got the upside right now, the upside factor. And I think the Cardinals are going to come out on top of this game. I think they're going to take the lead, and I think that's going to dictate the script to have maybe a higher volume for Mooney rather than Montgomery. Yeah. That's just my gut.
Yeah, I mean, they only put up 16 on the Lions during our Thanksgiving game last Thursday. I mean, they're anemic a little bit on offense right now. They're still trying to find their stride. They don't have Justin Fields. I believe Andy Dalton's going to be taking the helm this week. Yeah. So I kind of agree with this. I kind of have a feeling that David Montgomery might have a little bit more of a breakout game because I think he's going to get some more volume in this one. But I'm just not confident against this Arizona front. But do we want to move on to the passing for the Bears and the Cardinals now?
Well, yeah. We're tight end Zach Ertz. He's this mid-season acquisition. I think Ertz has been shown to be more of a contributing factor on the Arizona Cardinals offense. That being said, Chicago has been giving up the 8th fewest points to tight ends this year. Though that we've seen in these big weather games, typically some of the deeper passes are muted. So I'm interested to see if Zach Ertz gets actually a little bit more volume, especially as he acclimates more to the offense in this game.
Yeah.
And I think he's worth a potential start in redraft and even flyer on DFS.
Yeah, and they had a bye last week, but the last game against Seattle, he had 9 targets, 8 catches, 88 yards, and 2 TDs. I think they know that he could be a really viable option here, especially in the red zone, right? And he could get separation. He's a physical tight end. I know he's kind of dropped off over the last few years, but I think he has some potential here. I don't think he's a bad play on DFS either. He's a little bit less than some of these other top tier tight ends, but he still gives you that potential, that touchdown upside. So I'm okay with Zach Ertz. What about Cole Kmet, who's been emerging lately as well?
Yeah, so I was burned by Khamet a couple of weeks ago in my DFS lineup. I thought he would have a much better productive game, but last time playing against Detroit, he had 11 targets, 8 receptions with 65 yards. He was a big, significant part of the passing attack, and I believe that was with Andy Dalton. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. So Andy Dalton's back here. He feels comfortable with passing to the tight end position. Obviously, it seems more comfortable than what Justin Fields has been. I think that Cole Kmet's going to have a safe PPR floor here. Decent. I think he's a decent play again in this game here because of the limited wide receiver corps of the Chicago Bears. I think Mooney's going to have opportunity as well, and I think number 2 option here is Cole Kmet. So I do feel good about starting Kmet in this game.
Yeah, I mean, in his last, let's say his last 5 games, he's had 6 targets, 8 targets. He did have a down game against Baltimore with only 2 targets. And then last week, as you mentioned during the Detroit game, he had 11 targets. So the Notre Dame product here, I think, will have a safe floor, especially in rainy conditions. We typically see usually passing options, usually see about a 10% dip in similar games. But tight ends, sometimes they act as a safety net. And especially for Andy Dalton, who sometimes likes to just drop off the ball, short yardage, Cole Kmet may be a benefactor of this situation.
Yeah. And finally, with regards to defenses, both defenses get a slight boost here based off of the weather conditions, just because of we see typically more mistakes made, more fumbles, etc., or erroneous throws based off of wind. So I think that if you're looking at DFS, I think you could potentially play either the Cardinals or the Bears in this matchup. Bears are actually in DFS. Bears are actually at 2,600. The Cardinals are a bit higher at 3,400. That's because Chicago's been a worse offense. So Cardinals seem to be a pretty good DFS play this week to me, especially with some of the weather conditions here.
Yeah, and then you mentioned Darnell Mooney. I don't know if some people may be wondering, hey, do I play this guy in rainy conditions? I mean, he has just been an all-star of late, getting basically a touchdown in the last 2 weeks. Last 3 weeks he's had 2 of the 3 weeks he's had touchdowns, and getting above 15 fantasy points in our league the last 3 weeks. So if you have him, start him. I mean, you got to start him. Andy Dalton's going to look his way, but really temper expectations. He's maybe not going to get you that 50-yard bomb that he's been able to pull out of the hat the last several weeks. So, I mean, you play him, but maybe limit expectations a little bit. And then Andy Dalton, he doesn't seem to have a huge or be impacted by rain and other precipitation or wind as much as other quarterbacks. But I think he's going to be a game manager in this one, so don't expect big things from him either.
And I just want to say we are streaming live, so I just want to say hello to Yanni. Thanks for joining the stream, buddy. And Lex, thanks for your coming in today, asking the question here. Based off of this particular game, Lex is debating between playing Zach Ertz in his flex or Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks is going up against the Indianapolis Colts I think it's a home game at Houston. So, Sean, in this particular matchup, do you feel confident in playing Ertz over Brandon Cooks, or would you take the wide receiver 1 of Houston with Tyrod Taylor at the helm?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about Ertz in this one. I think he's going to get the volume. I think he's a trusted receiver. I know that's a little bit riskier, but I think the touchdown upside is there with Ertz. We've seen that he is looked at in the red zone. Cooks is still a solid receiver. I mean, the Indianapolis Colts, I'll be honest, I don't love playing my players against the Indianapolis Colts. Nowadays, right now, the Colts are 10-point favorites on a 44.5 over-under. So they're not expecting the Texans to get a whole lot of points in this one. So I'd be going with the touchdown upside of Ertz if it were me.
Yeah, and Cooks seems to have an illness this past week. So it is something to pay attention to, though he did return to practice on Friday. And, it does seem like he should be ready to go. I know last week he had a touchdown, but he only had 5 targets. So, and that was against the New York Jets. So as Sean mentions here, I would probably lean in favor of Ertz in this one as well, just because the defense is going to be a little bit harder than the Jets were last week, and Cooks didn't really produce all that well. So
yeah.